Hey there Wargamers, this is Justin from Amp Services with this week's X-Wing Wednesday video. In this video we're going to be discussing Nera Dantels and her B-Wing from the Rebel faction, and rightfully so when we're right off the heels of our discussion last week involving Major Rhymer, specifically because they're very similar in their builds. Now if you watched last week's video, you'll notice that there are a few upgrades that Nera Dantels does not have down here that Major Rhymer did, and those are the missile upgrades. That's unfortunately one of the vices with the B-Wing, it can't take missiles. Other than that, the build still works, it's very solid, and let's jump right in and discuss the pilot. So Nera Dantels here comes in at 26 points. She has a 5 pilot skill, 3 attack, 1 evade, 3 hull, 5 shields. Now, the 3 hull and 5 shields is really particularly nice for her because she has a combined 8 life, which makes her a little bit of a tank. Her 1 evade makes it hard to shake off a lot of attacks, but she can take several hits before she's going to go down. Her 3 attack value is really good for 2 reasons. One, because we're running guidance chips, and we'll discuss that in a little bit more depth here shortly. And also because one of the ways to shut down people using munitions is to get inside range 1, well, at least when they're using munitions that have a minimum range of 2 to 3. So if you get inside range 1 on Nera Dantels inside of her front arc, she's going to be rolling 4 attack dice against you. So even though you did stop her from firing her torpedoes, she's still going to be rolling 4 attack dice. Now this isn't going to help you if you're getting flanked from the side or the rear, but her pilot ability comes in handy when ships are outside of your primary arc. So if they're trying to not get inside range 1 in your front arc to give you 4 attack dice, you may be able to catch them when they're coming from your side or rear before they get inside range 1, particularly with arc dodgers. Now, this ability is not just useful for helping to combat arc dodgers, it's also good when you fly by an enemy. So let's say, for example, somebody gets up in range 1 of you because they don't want to get hit with torpedoes. You don't get off your torpedoes that turn because they're too close. In subsequent turns, you are going to be moving past that target most likely. So now you've flown by, and with her pilot ability that reads, you may perform torpedo secondary weapon attacks against enemy ships outside your firing arc. Because of that, now you're able to fire at the ships that have just flown by. This is really awesome. It's another 360 degree firing ability for the rebels, even if you're only going to get 2 shots off a game with it. The alpha strike potential is pretty nice, and the fact that she can catch things that fly by. Now, her 5 pilot skill is a little bit lacking. That makes it to where she's probably going to get shot up a little bit before she fires, but the fact that she's only going to get off at most 2 torpedo shots a game makes it a little bit easier having that lower, or easier it is to take having that lower pilot skill, because you know that she's going to get shot up, and you know, if she goes down, at least you didn't invest a lot of points on gear you didn't get to use. So if you manage to get off both your torpedo shots on her in a game before she goes down, you're probably looking pretty good points wise. So let's discuss some of the upgrades that I would suggest using on Nera Dantels for a torpedo build. First of all, a Deadeye. Old Faithful here that's so useful on lots of ships that are trying to run torpedoes and missiles. It comes in at 1 point and it reads, you may treat the attack target lock header as attack focus. When an attack instructs you to spend a target lock, you may spend a focus token instead. Now, as I've discussed in previous videos, this is particularly useful because there's maybe situations where you're moving, and at the end of your movement, going into your action portion of your activation for the ship, you may not have any enemies within range 3 or closer for target lock. Especially when you're going up against ships or lists with high amounts of aces and low ships that have high pilot skills. They, like say Vader for example, pilot skill 11 with veteran instincts, he may be outside of your range after you move. So you can't target lock him, and you would ideally want to, so you can get your torpedoes off. No, instead, you go ahead and take that focus, and then during Vader's activation, if he moves inside range 3, you know that you can now spin the focus when it's your turn to fire and shoot those torpedoes at him, where otherwise you would not have been able to because you didn't have a target lock. Without this, you would have had to have taken several more turns to get Vader target locked or another ace, and then hope they don't get inside range 1, and so on and so forth. So this makes it a lot easier to get off the initial hit. It also gives you a little bit more versatility than a target lock would have. So say hypothetically you move up, you have the target that you want to fire at that's inside range 3 now, and you use your target lock on them. that pretty much relegates you to a completely offensive turn. By having Deadeye and sitting on a focus, you still do have that pocket option to spin the focus to save your life defensively if you're being shot at before you get to fire. Now that using that focus before you get to fire your torpedoes does limit your offensive capabilities for the turn, but in a pinch, if you really needed to spin the focus rather than get off torpedoes to survive, you still have the option, whereas with a target lock, you would not. So now, for the 2 torpedo options that I would suggest for Nera Dantels, we are looking at plasmas and protons, in my opinion. I think those are the best to use for her. Now, the protons come in at 4 points, right here, and the plasmas come in at 3 points. So, if you're looking for a lean build, and you're trying to shave points, even though it is only 1, still trying to shave points, you might start with plasma torpedoes. Now, these come in at 3 points, and they read: attack target lock, spin your target lock, and discard this card to perform this attack. If this attack hits, after dealing damage, remove 1 shield token from the defender. Now, as I've mentioned in previous videos, the thing I like most about using torpedoes and missiles is the range 3 capabilities, where otherwise the enemies would have a +1 to their evade value. When you're using these secondary weapons, they don't. So being able to fire at range 2 to 3, especially at range 3, with 4 attack dice is huge. You're firing as many attack dice at range 3 as you would be at range 1 with your B-Wing. Now, the plasma torpedoes, I think their main benefit is not necessarily their ability here. It is more so that you save 1 point. Now, there are situations where these plasma torpedoes are going to be really effective against other ships with lots of shields, like a B-Wing, a Y-Wing, the Jumpmaster, the Decimator, the Lambda, things like that, big ships. But in general, their ability to hit, you're limited. You know, you don't have the same effectiveness you would have with proton torpedoes or concussion missiles. So you're really banking on getting a nice hit in on a target and getting the extra shields off. This also loses effectiveness when you're going up against, say, scum who are limited on shields. Let's say you're going up against a Kirax fighter that has 1 shield. You fire plasma torpedoes. At that point, your ability is completely useless. If you strip off all the shields on a target and this ability doesn't come into play, you kind of paid points for something you didn't get to use. So this one's very situational, and I think its main benefit is shaving that 1 point. Now, the second torpedo that I would suggest is the proton torpedo. It does come in at 4 points, 1 point more than the plasma, and it reads: attack target lock. Spend your target lock and discard this card to perform this attack. You may change one of your focus results to a critical result. Now this is pretty awesome. I like this one a lot more so than the plasma torpedoes because these ones have an increased chance to hit. They still fire at range 2 to 3, you still get 4 dice. So at range 3, you're really, sticking it to the enemy where they don't get that extra evade, especially if they're banking on that, like a TIE Fighter or a Sutterfell, things like that. They really want that extra evade from the range, you're taking that away. Now, because on the attack dice, you have 2 focus results out of 8, so a 25% chance on each dice to get a focus result. You have pretty good odds of getting a focus on 4 dice and being able to change that to a critical. So statistically speaking, based on the odds of the dice, you've got a 50-50 shot per die to get a hit result. With 4 attack dice, you're looking at 2 out of the 4, so 50% of the dice are going to hit. The remaining 2 dice are going to probably have blanks or focus result or some combination of those. Strictly speaking statistics, you're going to have those dice rolls where you get 4 blanks or 4 focus results. Those do happen, but just, looking at the straight statistics, that's what you should expect. So looking at 2 hits and possibly a focus result on one of the dice that doesn't hit. In that particular case, you get to change that focus result to a critical. And now this leads me into the modification that I would suggest on Nera Dantels, and that is the guidance chips. So hold the train of thought on the protons, and we're going to go straight into guidance and come back. So guidance chips are a 0-point upgrade. It's huge. And they read: once per round, when attacking with a torpedo or missile secondary weapon, you may change 1 die result to a hit result, or a critical result if your primary weapon value is a 3 or higher. If you remember earlier in the video, I was discussing the stats on the B-Wing, and it has that 3 attack value. That's huge with guidance chips. It's one of the few ships in the game that can take munitions type weapons and benefit from the 3 or higher clause down here. So when we consider guidance chips with The proton torpedoes here, the proton torpedoes, again, they say you may change one of your focus results to a critical result. So you're looking at 4 attack dice, probably going to hit with 2. The other 2 dice are going to be some combination of blank results or focus results. So if you roll a focus on one of those, you get to change it to a crit, and then the remaining blank or focus result, you can use your guidance chip to change that to a critical as well. Using guidance chips in conjunction with proton torpedoes is devastating. You know, you may only get, at worst, you roll 4 blank results. You get at least 1 critical hit from guidance chips. That's the worst possible roll you could get. Let's say you roll any combination of blanks and focus results, though, you get a minimum of 2 hits because of the proton torpedo ability and guidance chips. And those are in the worst case scenarios. Now again, best case scenario, you roll statistically sound, so you get 2 out of the 4 hits. And then of the remaining non-hit results, if they're both blanks, use your guidance chips to add a crit, so you're looking at 3 hits. If there is a blank and a focus result, you get a crit from the protons and a crit from the guidance chips. I cannot emphasize enough how statistically probable it is to get 3 or 4 hits on your initial alpha strike with a proton torpedo in conjunction with guidance chips. This is devastating. It's huge. Now, that's why I like the guidance chips proton combo more so than guidance chips and plasma torpedoes. Again, you can almost guarantee higher hit results with the protons over the plasmas, and the protons don't care what your shield value is to maximize effectiveness. They're just blowing you up just the same. Now, the final upgrade that I would suggest with Nera Dantels, which is no surprise here, is extra munitions. Extra munitions comes in with, or at 2 points, and it reads: when you equip this card, place 1 ordnance token on each equipped torpedo, missile, and bomb upgrade card. When you are instructed to discard an upgrade card, you may discard 1 ordnance token on that card instead. Now, this is essential. You need this. It's going to help keep your point cost low. If you didn't have extra munitions and you wanted to run plasmas and proton torpedoes, you're looking at 7 points. If you wanted to run 2 plasma torpedoes, you're looking at 6 points. If you wanted to run 2 protons, you're looking at 8 points. Now, with extra munitions, you can change the 2 plasma torpedoes from being 6 points down to 5 points, basically, or the 2 protons from being 8 points to 6 points. So the extra munitions it saves a lot of points, and it's even more effective in conjunction with the proton torpedoes because it's actually saving you a little bit more as compared to the plasmas. And the major issue with Nera, even with extra munitions, is that she's only going to get off at maximum 2 torpedo attacks in a game, so you have to leverage that. So what would a build look like on her points wise? So let's say you want to run plasma torpedoes with extra munitions. So you're looking at 26 points for Nera. Plasma torpedoes is going to put you at 29. You throw in Deadeye, put you at 30. Throw in extra munitions, 32 points. Guidance chips is free. Now, if you wanted to run proton torpedoes instead, you're looking at 33 points. So it's a pretty tight point spread here. 1 point difference between both builds, and she's particularly effective. Now, the major issue I have with the B-Wing as opposed to the TIE Bomber and Z95 Alpha Strike spam is that she is a little pricey. She can do what you need her to do, but coming in at 32 to 33 points is a little bit hard to swallow. I mean, you could be fielding, you could be looking at different options. You could be looking at X-Wings with R2-D2 or R5-P9, things like that that have a lot more survivability than the B-Wing. So if you're going to consider running Nera Dantels, you're really going to have to consider what support ships are going to go with her, because she is going to be a big flying target. So keep that in mind when you're building your lists. Now, what did you guys think? Is this something you've done before, something you're going to try? Let me know below. I'd like to get a discussion started. Additionally, if you haven't already, please consider giving us a like on Facebook and subscribing here on YouTube. Also, I get paid to paint, and while I did not paint this model right here, I do paint quite a bit of Warhammer miniatures, and I've painted some X-Wing stuff. If you'd like to have me paint something for you, please click quote request now. Finally, still trying to drive home my Patreon page, so if you guys would like to help support me in the channel and help me get some better content and more content out in the future, please take a moment to check out my Patreon page, and if you decide to support me, you'll get some cool swag in return. Anyways guys, thanks for watching, hope you enjoyed, and as always, happy wargaming.